Have you ever wondered how a country with vast natural resources could end up being one of the poorest nations in the world? Well, the answer lies in the intriguing and complex history of North Korea. Today, we uncover the surprising reasons behind North Korea's extreme poverty and how it became a cautionary tale for economic development. Get ready to be shocked as we explore the fascinating story of how North Korea got extremely poor. Welcome to the Seeker's Edge, where we seek knowledge that'll give you an edge in life. North Korea, a country situated in East Asia, has faced numerous crises throughout its history, including natural disasters, economic mismanagement, and political instability. This has shaped the country and left marks on their economy. Let's first take a look at their history. One notable aspect of Korea's history is its relationship with China. For many centuries, Korea served as a tributary state to various Chinese dynasties. During this time, Korea was required to pay tribute to China in exchange for protection and trade. This relationship with China had a significant impact on Korean culture, including its language, religion, and political structures. Chinese influence can be seen in the use of Chinese characters in the Korean language, the adoption of Confucianism as a guiding philosophy, and the establishment of a centralized bureaucracy. However, Korea's relationship with China wasn't always harmonious. There were times when Korea resisted Chinese influence and asserted its independence. For example, in the late 16th century, Korea successfully repelled the Japanese invasion with the help of China's Ming dynasty. However, the victory was very short-lived, as Korea was soon caught in the middle of a power struggle between China's Qing dynasty and Japan's Tokugawa shogunate. This left the country ravaged in destruction, so the hardship already began in the earlier days. But even in the modern era, Korea has faced new challenges to its existence. Korea was colonized by Japan in 1910. Japan exploited Korea for its natural resources and labor, using the country as a source of economic development for its own benefit. During this time, Koreans faced discrimination, forced labor, and cultural suppression. The Japanese government implemented policies that aimed to assimilate Koreans into Japanese culture, such as the forced use of the Japanese language and names. The colonization of Korea had lasting effects on Korean society and their culture and their politics. Japanese rule contributed to the suppression of Korean culture and identity, causing many Koreans to experience a sense of loss and trauma. The colonization also fueled Korean nationalism and resistance movements. During World War II, many Koreans were conscripted into the Japanese military or forced into labor, further deepening the trauma and resentment felt towards Japan. The colonization of Korea by Japan ended in 1945 after Japan's surrender at the end of World War II. In 1945, the Allied powers, including the United States, the Soviet Union, and Great Britain, declared war on Japan and demanded its unconditional surrender. After the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945, Japan surrendered to the Allies. As part of the surrender agreement, Japan was forced to give up its colonies, including Korea. Korea was then divided into two separate countries, with the Soviet Union occupying the north and the United States occupying the south. In 1948, the Republic of Korea was established in the south, while the Democratic Republic of Korea was established in the north. During this period, the reign of Kim Il-sung began. Kim Il-sung was a leader in the Korean resistance movement against the Japanese occupation, and he was supported by the Soviet Union during the early years of his leadership. Kim Il-sung's reign was marked by a series of military provocations and aggressive actions towards South Korea and to the United States. He ordered the invasion of South Korea in 1950, triggering the Korean War. On June 25th of 1950, North Korean forces invaded the South. The United States, with the backing of the United Nations, intervened on behalf of South Korea, while China intervened on behalf of North Korea. Kim Il-sung also received help from the Soviet Union. Soviet military aid was instrumental in equipping both the North Korean and Chinese forces fighting in Korea. The Soviet PPSH-41 submachine gun, nicknamed by U.S. forces the burp gun after the sound it made, it was widely supplied to both countries' armies, as was the T-34 and 85 medium tank, which was of great importance during the initial offensive by the communist side, when no U.S. armor, particularly the M24 Shafi light tank or anti-tank rockets, such as the M9 2.36-inch bazooka, could penetrate its heavy sloped armor. Soviet material aid was also fundamental for the air forces of both North Korea and China. By April of 1950, the Soviet Union had provided 63 of the North Korean Air Force's 178 aircraft, which, until September of 1950, proved highly effective against minimal South Korean air defenses, which was more heavily backed by US and UN air forces instead. The war lasted 3 years and resulted in the deaths of millions of people, including civilians. The war ended with a ceasefire agreement on July 27th of 1953. which established a demilitarized zone separating the two countries. However, the ceasefire agreement didn't officially end the war, as no peace treaty was ever signed. As the country was left devastated after the Korean War, Kim Il-sung was able to retrieve aid from both the Soviet Union and China. This aid was crucial to the development of North Korea. The Soviet Union and China provided North Korea with economic, military, and technical aid, which helped the country to rebuild its infrastructure and develop its economy. The aid provided by the Soviet Union and China had a significant impact on North Korea. It allowed North Korea to become more self-sufficient and a prosperous nation. The aid also helped North Korea to build up its armed forces, making it a more formidable opponent in any potential conflict. The aid from the Soviet Union and China came at a cost, though. North Korea became heavily dependent on these two countries for aid, and its economy became heavily centralized and reliant on state planning. This made North Korea vulnerable to economic shocks and changes in the international political climate. However, it was mainly Kim Il-sung's political decisions that crippled the North Korean economy, the Juche ideology, or Juche. Under Kim Il-sung's leadership, North Korea adopted a policy of self-reliance, or Juche, which emphasized domestic production and minimal reliance on foreign aid. This ideology had a significant impact on the country's military buildup and debt, and as part of the self-reliance policy, North Korea allocated a significant portion of its resources towards its military, with estimates suggesting that military spending accounted for over a third of the country's total budget. The country's military buildup included the development of nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, and a large standing army. This military buildup was intended to deter potential threats, primarily from South Korea and the United States, and to ensure North Korea's survival as an independent state. This ideology had led to a highly centralized, state-controlled economy that was largely cut off from the outside world. As a result, North Korea's economy had stagnated, and the country had become increasingly isolated from the global community. The focus on military went hand in hand with Kim Il-sung's obsession with building a heavy industry. Heavy industry refers to the production of large-scale machinery, such as mining equipment, construction machinery, and other capital goods. These goods are used to build infrastructure and support other industrial activities, making heavy industry a critical component of modern economic development. Kim Il-sung believed that building heavy industry was the key to making North Korea a prosperous and self-sufficient country. To this end, he allocated the vast majority of the country's resources towards this goal. In the early 1950s, Kim established the 5-year plan, which called for the development of heavy industry as the country's top priority. He aimed to achieve rapid industrialization through a centrally planned economy, which was similar to the Soviet Union's model of socialism. With the support of the Soviet Union and China, North Korea embarked on a massive industrialization campaign in the 1950s and 60s. The government invested heavily into heavy industry, such as steel and chemical production, to build up its industry capacity. North Korea's focus on heavy industry meant that it neglected its agricultural sector, leading to a significant food shortage. However, the government's efforts to build up its industrial capacity were successful in other ways. North Korea became a major arms exporter, supplying weapons and military equipment to countries like Syria, Iran, and Cuba. In the 1970s and 1980s, North Korea shifted its focus to light industries such as consumer electronics and textiles. The government hoped that this shift would help diversify the economy and increase exports. However, these efforts were largely unsuccessful. These economic policies, in combination with the collapse of the Soviet Union, made North Korea suffer one of the greatest famines in modern history. The North Korean famine, also known as the Arduous March or the March of Suffering, started during this period. You see, North Korea was heavily reliant on the Soviet Union for food. And in the 1980s, the Soviet Union embarked on a political and economic reform. It began to demand that North Korea repay the Soviet Union for all the past and current aid which it sent to North Korea, amounts which North Korea could not repay. By 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved, ending all aid and trade concessions. Without Soviet aid, the flow of imports into the North Korean agricultural sector ended, and the government proved to be too inflexible to respond. This, alongside with natural disasters, spiraled the situation out of control in a very short time and would in turn cause tens of thousands of North Koreans to suffer and die. Devastating floods ravaged North Korea in 1995. Arable land, harvests, grain reserves, and social and economic infrastructure were destroyed. The United Nations Department of Humanitarian Affairs reported that between the 30th of July and the 18th of August in 1995, rains caused devastating floods in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. In one area, Gyeongsang County in North Honghae Province, 877 millimeters or 35 inches of rain were recorded to have fallen in just 7 hours, an intensity of precipitation unheard of in this area. Water flow engorged the Amnok River, which runs along the Korea/China border, which was estimated at 4.8 billion tons over a 72-hour period. Flooding of this magnitude hasn't occurred in that area in at least 70 years. The major issues caused by created by the flooding were not only the destruction of cropland and harvest, but also the loss of emergency grain reserves, because many of them were stored underground. The floods in July and August of 1995 were described as being of biblical proportions by independent observers. Estimates on the death toll vary widely. Out of the total population of approximately 22 million, somewhere between 240,000 and 3.5 million North Koreans died from starvation or hunger-related illnesses, with the deaths peaking in 1997. Today, North Korea remains one of the poorest countries in the world, with a per capita GDP estimated to be around $1,300. Kim Il-sung's successor Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un have largely maintained the status quo in North Korea. The country and its leadership are constrained by the ideologies that brought them into existence, making it impossible to enact reforms without risking collapse. North Korea serves as a stark reminder that nations governed by small, power-hungry elite obsessed with maintaining control and monopolizing the truth are responsible for untold human suffering. In the 20th century, socialist command economies emerged, but North Korea stands as the last vestige of that crumbling political system. For the time being, the people of North Korea continue to suffer, and their plight will likely persist until the regime inevitably crumbles. That's it for today. Thanks for watching the video, and if you liked it, please consider subscribing to The Seeker's Edge. Until next time.